The notary arrived just after my husband cut his retirement cake. She placed a navy folder beside my plate and said, "Before I notarize the cash-out refinance, I need to see identification from both homeowners." I thought she had the wrong table. Greg had told me we were signing pension forms. We had 23 guests around us, 2 empty champagne bottles on the sideboard, and a sheet cake that said, "Finally free after 34 years." Our daughter Leah was collecting paper plates. Our son Owen was helping Greg's former assistant, Tessa, move gifts away from the window. I looked at the folder. The first page listed our home address. The second listed a new loan for $240,000. The disbursement instructions named a business I had never heard of. Second Spring Wellness LLC. Managing member, Tessa Hale. I read the name twice, then looked across the table at the woman holding my husband's retirement gifts. "Greg," I said, "what is this?" He did not look surprised. He set down the cake knife and wiped frosting from his thumb with a napkin. "It's the studio investment I mentioned. You mentioned possibly helping with a small business loan. This is the cleanest way to do it. By borrowing against our house?" The room had gone quiet enough that I could hear the refrigeration unit behind the restaurant bar. Greg leaned toward me and lowered his voice, as if privacy could still be restored by volume. "Monica, don't turn this into a performance. We discussed moving forward separately." "No, we didn't." Tessa stopped moving the gifts. Greg's sister looked down at her plate. 2 men from his sales team suddenly became interested in the retirement banner. The notary rested one hand on the folder. "If either signer has questions, we should pause." "There are no questions," Greg said. "My wife is emotional because the numbers look large without context." I turned to the signature page. My name was printed beneath his. So was a statement saying we understood the loan would be secured by the home we had spent 26 years paying for. "What context makes $240,000 small?" I asked. Greg's face tightened. "The business plan is solid. The lease has already been negotiated. Tessa has the clients. I have the operational experience. The house has more than enough equity." "What do you mean, you have the operational experience?" Tessa put down the gift bag in her hands. Greg looked at her, then back at me. "I'm joining the business. You retired yesterday. From Calder Medical." "I did not retire from being useful." That sentence sounded rehearsed. So did the next one. "Tessa and I are building the next part of our lives." Leah whispered, "Dad." Greg ignored her. I looked at Tessa. She was 42, 13 years younger than I was, with short dark hair and the same controlled posture she had used every time I met her at company dinners. She had been Greg's regional assistant for 9 years. She remembered birthdays, fixed travel problems, and knew exactly which hotel room Greg preferred at conferences. "Is this only a business?" I asked her. Tessa's face lost color. She looked at Greg. "You said she knew." That was the moment the brunch stopped being confusing. Greg pushed his chair back. "This is not the place." "You brought a notary," I said. "You chose the place." Tessa took one step away from the gifts. "Greg told me you had already agreed on the house." "Agreed on what?" "That he would keep his share of the equity and you would keep most of the retirement accounts. He said your lawyer had approved the structure." "I don't have a divorce lawyer." Tessa stared at him. Greg raised both hands. "Everyone needs to calm down." I closed the folder. "I am calm," I said. "And I am not signing this." He stepped closer. "If you walk away from this table, the lease falls apart on Monday. Then it falls apart. You would destroy 2 years of work because you're embarrassed? I would refuse to mortgage my home for a plan you hid from me." I slid the folder back to the notary. "There will be no signature today." She nodded, gathered the loose pages and returned them to her case. Greg looked around the room as though someone else might overrule me. No one did. I stood, picked up my purse and turned to Leah and Owen. "You do not have to choose a side at a retirement brunch," I said. "Your father and I will handle this privately." Then I walked out before Greg could turn my refusal into a debate. 6 months earlier, I would have told you Greg and I were preparing for the most ordinary retirement in America. We had been married for 30 years. Our house was a 4-bedroom colonial outside Columbus, bought when Leah was 3 and Owen was still a plan we talked about late at night. We refinanced once when rates dropped, once when the roof and furnace failed in the same winter, and then spent 12 years making extra payments until only $78,000 remained. The house was not luxurious. The kitchen cabinets were older than both our children's marriages. The upstairs hallway creaked near the linen closet. The maple in the backyard dropped branches every time the wind rose above 20 miles an hour. But it was ours in the way a home becomes yours after thousands of ordinary days. Greg had traveled throughout our marriage. He sold hospital equipment across 3 states and eventually became regional sales manager for Calder Medical. He was good at making clients feel remembered. He knew which surgeon played golf, which administrator had twins, and which purchasing manager hated being called after 4 on Fridays. I worked as a laboratory administrator at a community hospital. My job was less visible. If I did it well, specimens moved, machines were calibrated, schedules held, and nobody outside the lab knew how close the day had come to breaking. We raised our children around those 2 careers. I handled most school mornings because Greg left early. He handled Saturday sports when he was home. We argued about money, his travel, my tendency to plan every hour of a vacation, and his ability to leave an empty cereal box in a cabinet as though it might refill itself. We also laughed. That is important. I do not need to erase 3 decades to explain why they ended. The year before his retirement, Greg began talking about restlessness. I don't want to become one of those men who retires and spends 6 hours comparing lawn fertilizer, he said. I agreed. We made a list of things we might do. Drive the Pacific Coast. Rent a place in Arizona for February. Volunteer. Take cooking classes. Visit Leah in Denver without making her feel she had to entertain us every minute. Greg liked the list when we made it. Then he stopped adding to it. He began staying late for transition meetings. Tessa was coordinating the handover to his replacement, so her name came up often. Tessa found an error in the commission files. Tessa thinks the new director is going to lose 2 accounts. Tessa wants to open a wellness studio after she leaves Calder. The studio was supposed to offer physical therapy referrals, supervised exercise for older adults, nutrition classes, and recovery programs for people leaving the hospital. I told Greg it sounded ambitious. She already has half the contacts, he said. What she needs is someone who knows how to build referral relationships. You mean you? He smiled. Maybe as an advisor, 10 hours a month. Enough to keep my brain alive. That was the small business help I thought he had mentioned. I asked how much money Tessa needed. She's talking to lenders, he said. I might put in something modest if the numbers make sense. Define modest. 20 or 30,000. Only if we both agree. I told him I was not comfortable investing before we met with our retirement planner. He said that was reasonable. Then he changed the subject. Nothing in that conversation sounded like an affair. Nothing sounded like a $240,000 loan. Nothing sounded like Greg planned to spend retirement building a company with another woman. There were signs, of course. Every betrayed person can find signs after the fact. Greg started keeping his phone face down. He bought 2 new shirts he said were for farewell dinners. One Saturday, he drove 90 minutes to look at commercial property with Tessa and came home talking about natural light, treatment rooms, and parking ratios with more excitement than he had shown about our trip west. I noticed those things. I did not combine them into the truth because I had no reason to think they belonged together. Tessa had been in our home. She came to Greg's 50th birthday. She sent flowers when my mother died. At the Calder holiday dinner, she once spent 20 minutes showing me photographs of her rescue dog. She was not a mysterious name on a phone. She was a person Greg had placed safely inside our shared life. The retirement brunch had been his idea. I offered to host something at our house. Greg said he wanted a neutral place where nobody had to clean. He booked a private room at a restaurant near his office and insisted on handling the guest list. Tessa's name was near the top. She did most of the work keeping me sane, he said. She should be there. The week before the brunch, he told me a mobile notary would stop by near the end. For what? I asked. Pension elections and beneficiary confirmations. Human Resources is trying to finish everything before the month closes. Can't we sign at home? Some pages need witnesses, and Leah and Owen will already be there. I should have questioned why our adult children needed to witness pension forms. I did ask whether I should bring anything. Just your driver's license, he said. The instruction was so ordinary that I put my license in the small purse I planned to carry and thought nothing more about it. The morning of the brunch, Greg wore the blue blazer I bought him for our 25th anniversary. He stood in front of the bedroom mirror, adjusting the cuffs. "You nervous?" I asked. "About retirement? About everyone making speeches. I survived 34 years of hospital procurement committees. I can survive my sister telling the fishing story again." He kissed my forehead. That was less than 4 hours before he asked me to put our home behind his lover's business. In the restaurant parking lot, I sat in my car with both hands on the steering wheel. I did not cry immediately. My body felt strangely practical. I noticed that the car needed gas. I noticed a scratch near the air vent. I noticed that one of the restaurant's balloons had escaped and become trapped in a bare tree. Then Leah opened the passenger door and got in. "Mom, are you okay?" "No." It was the only honest answer available. She closed the door. Through the windshield, I saw Owen standing near the restaurant entrance with Greg. My son had both hands in his coat pockets. Greg was talking quickly. Owen was not looking at him. "Did you know?" I asked Leah. "About Tessa?" "No." "Did your father tell you we were separating?" "No. He told me you were worried about retirement money and might overreact to the business." I looked at her. "When did he say that?" "Last week. He asked me to remind you that the house had plenty of equity." Greg had tried to prepare witnesses before presenting the loan. He had not told Leah the truth. He had given her a role in managing my reaction without explaining what I would be reacting to. "I am sorry," she said. "You did not do this. I should have told you." He made it sound like a disagreement about investment risk. "That is what he wanted you to hear." Owen walked toward the car. Greg followed him halfway, then stopped. My phone rang. "Greg." I let it stop. He called again. Leah looked at the screen. "Do you want me to answer?" "No. I do not want either of you between us." Owen tapped on my window. I lowered it. "Dad says you misunderstood the paperwork," he said. "Your father asked me to secure a $240,000 loan with our home. The proceeds were going to Tessa's company." I understood it. Owen's jaw tightened. "He says it's a temporary bridge loan. The papers called it a 30-year refinance." "Oh." One syllable ended whatever argument Greg had sent him to make. I asked both children to go home. "I am not going to discuss your father's affair in a parking lot," I said. "I am also not going to ask you to punish him for me. I need a place to stay tonight, and then I need professional advice." Leah offered her guest room. Owen said he would bring me anything I needed from the house. I told him not to enter without Greg's knowledge and not to remove documents or property. Even in that moment, I knew I did not want my children becoming investigators. As they left, Tessa came out of the restaurant alone. She stood several spaces away, holding her coat closed. "Monica," she said. I almost drove away. Then I lowered the window again. "I am not here to fight with you," she said. "Good. Greg told me you two had been separated inside the house for almost a year. We shared a bedroom last night." Her eyes closed for a second. "He said the legal part was delayed because of pensions." "There is no legal part. There has been no filing, no mediation, and no agreement about the house." He showed me a settlement spreadsheet. "A spreadsheet he made is not a settlement." She nodded slowly. "He said you were keeping your pension, most of his retirement account, and the house until the loan closed. Then he would use his equity for the studio." "He cannot assign himself equity by making a spreadsheet." Tessa looked back toward the restaurant door. "The studio lease starts Monday," she said. "We paid a deposit." "We?" "Greg and I." "From what account?" "I don't know where his part came from." "How much was his part?" She hesitated. 32,000. That was the second number that changed the day. "And how long have you been together?" I asked. 14 months. Greg's transition meetings had begun 14 months earlier. "Did you know he was still living with me?" "Yes." "Did you know we still attended family events as a married couple?" "He said it was for the children. Our children are 31 and 28. She looked ashamed, but she did not claim innocence. "I believed what made this possible," she said. "I understand that now." It was a more honest sentence than any Greg had spoken. "Do you love him?" I asked. "I thought we were starting a life together." "That is not what I asked." She looked at me. "Yes." I nodded. "Then you should know that the life he offered you required my signature and my house." He did not have either. Tessa began to cry. I did not comfort her. I also did not insult her. "I am sorry," she said. "You knew he was married. You accepted an explanation that kept you from asking harder questions. His lies to you do not erase your choices." "I know. Do not contact me again unless it concerns a document bearing my name." She stepped back from the car. I drove to Leah's house. That evening, Greg sent 11 text messages. The first said I had humiliated him. The second said Tessa and I had misunderstood each other. The third said the loan was only leverage, not a real risk. The fourth said he loved me in a different way. The fifth said his retirement payout entitled him to build something of his own. By the ninth, he was asking me to return in the morning so we could sign privately. I responded once. "I will not sign any loan, transfer, guarantee, deed, or business document. I will speak with independent counsel on Monday. Please communicate only about immediate household needs until then." He replied, "You are ending 30 years over paperwork." I turned off notifications. The paperwork had not ended my marriage. It had told the truth about what Greg expected the marriage to become. On Sunday morning, Leah made coffee while I used my authorized access to review the accounts I jointly owned with Greg. I did not search his email. I did not guess passwords. I opened the same banking dashboard I had used for years to pay property taxes and check automatic withdrawals. The $32,000 payment was there. It had left our joint savings account in 2 transfers, both labeled consulting deposit. One was made 3 months earlier. The other was made the previous week. I remembered asking why the balance had dropped. Greg told me he moved money into a higher-yield retirement bridge account. There was no bridge account. I downloaded the statements and did nothing else. I wanted to move the remaining money somewhere he could not touch it. I wanted to call the bank and stop every card. I wanted to make the kind of decisive move people applaud in stories because the consequences fit inside one sentence. Instead, I waited for advice. Monday morning, I met with a family law attorney named Susan Bell. She was in her early 60s and wore reading glasses on a chain. I told her about the brunch, the loan packet, the affair, and the transfers. She asked exact questions. Whose names were on the deed? Both. Whose names were on the mortgage? Both. Had I signed a loan application? No. Had I authorized the transfers? No. Was the savings account jointly accessible? Yes. Did I have copies of the statements? Yes. She did not tell me Greg would lose the house. She did not tell me I could take all the remaining money. She did not promise that Tessa's business would fail. The first goal is to prevent new joint obligations while we identify what already happened, she said. Do not sign anything. Do not destroy anything. Do not represent to anyone that the studio money belongs to you until we trace it. She drafted notice to Greg's attorney once he retained one. The notice proposed temporary financial rules. No new debt secured by the house, no extraordinary withdrawals, no sale or transfer of major assets, and ordinary bills continuing as before. Greg called me after receiving it. You brought lawyers into this before giving me one private conversation. You brought a notary to a family brunch. He was silent. I was trying to keep the process civil, he said. Civil would have been telling me you wanted to leave before promising our equity to someone else. The studio would have paid the loan. Maybe. That was a risk you planned for me to accept after the cake was cut. I panicked. The lease deadline moved up. The affair did not move up. He exhaled into the phone. Can we meet without the kids? They were never supposed to be involved. We can meet with a mediator after counsel confirms the temporary finances. You sound like a contract. Right now a contract is more reliable than your word. That was the last personal argument we had by telephone. We met with a mediator 10 days later. Greg looked tired. Retirement had not softened him. It had removed the office structure that used to tell him where to be. He admitted the relationship with Tessa. He admitted the transfers. He admitted creating the settlement spreadsheet without showing it to me. I was trying to design something fair, he said. Did fair include telling me? I could not find the right moment. So you created one where refusing would embarrass me in front of our children. I thought you would see that the numbers worked. You thought I would sign because everyone was watching. He looked down. The mediator asked what Greg believed would happen after the loan closed. He said he planned to move into an apartment near the studio. Tessa would keep her own place until my position was less raw. We would tell the children our separation was mutual. I would remain in the house for 2 years, after which we would sell it and divide whatever equity remained after the new loan. He said this as though he were describing a schedule we had misplaced. When did I agree to any of that? I asked. You said you did not know if we had a future after I retired. I remembered the conversation. It happened after Greg canceled our third retirement planning dinner because Tessa needed help with a lease proposal. I had said, if every plan we make comes second to that studio, I don't know what our future looks like. Greg had converted my warning into consent. That was not a separation agreement, I said. It told me where you stood. No, it told you that your choices were damaging the marriage. You used the damage as permission to make more choices. The mediator stopped us there. We agreed that Greg would remain in the house temporarily while I stayed with Leah, but neither of us would sign new property documents. Greg would provide the studio contracts and a complete account of transferred funds. We would split ordinary expenses under a written temporary plan. The children would not carry messages. It was not satisfying in the way revenge is satisfying. Greg did not leave the meeting penniless. Tessa was not arrested. The restaurant did not post a video of my refusal. Nobody at Calder called to tell me the entire company had turned against them. Real consequences arrived more slowly. Without the home equity loan, Second Spring could not take the large property Greg and Tessa had chosen. Their landlord retained part of the deposit under the lease negotiations and released the site to another tenant. Tessa found a smaller suite 6 months later and opened a reduced version of the studio with a conventional business loan and another investor. Greg was not part of it. She ended their business arrangement after learning that the money, property division, and legal approval he described did not exist. I learned that through financial disclosures, not from her. One letter from her attorney requested repayment of part of her deposit contribution from funds Greg might receive in the divorce. That dispute was theirs. The $32,000 Greg transferred did matter. Our attorneys traced it as part of the marital accounting. I did not receive a magical check for every dollar. It became one fact among pensions, savings, the house, vehicles, taxes, and 30 years of shared financial life. The house was appraised. Neither of us could comfortably buy out the other's share and still retire safely. 8 months after the brunch, we agreed to sell it. That hurt more than I expected. I walked through the empty rooms before the closing. Leah's bedroom still had a faint rectangle on the wall where a band poster hung. The kitchen door frame carried pencil marks from both children, then 2 newer marks from our grandchildren. Greg had patched the nail holes in the hallway but missed one beside the stairs. I wanted to believe keeping the house would prove I had one. The numbers said otherwise. So we sold it, paid the remaining mortgage, divided the equity according to the settlement, and adjusted Greg's unapproved transfers in the larger accounting. I moved into a smaller townhome 10 minutes from the hospital. Greg rented an apartment across town. He did not end up with Tessa. He also did not spend the rest of his life begging me to return. For a while he tried to explain. In counseling, he said retirement frightened him. Tessa made him feel needed. The studio gave him a future with walls, schedules, and people waiting for his decisions. And what was I? I asked. You were the person who knew me before any of that. That is history, Greg. It is not permission. He cried then. I believed the tears. I also believed the loan packet. Both things could be real. Our children handled the divorce differently. Leah was furious for months. Owen kept seeing his father for lunch but refused to discuss the studio. I told them the same thing every time the subject came up. You can have whatever relationship with your father is healthy for you. You do not owe me loyalty performances. I meant it. Greg had made them witnesses at the brunch because he thought family pressure would help him get my signature. I would not keep using them after the signature was refused. 1 year after the retirement brunch, Leah invited both of us to our granddaughter's school concert. Greg sat 3 rows behind me. We said hello. He asked about my work. I asked whether his knee had improved. There was no dramatic reconciliation and no public reckoning. When the children began singing, we both faced forward. I retired 18 months later than I originally planned. Not because Greg took everything. He did not. I stayed because rebuilding my financial plan carefully mattered more than proving I could leave on the old schedule. On my final day, the laboratory staff gave me a cake. Said, "Ask Monica before you touch anything." I laughed harder than anyone understood. There was no notary at that party. No surprise folder. No document waiting beneath the napkin. My successor gave a speech, I returned my badge, and I went home to a place with fewer rooms and no hidden debt. People sometimes ask what I said that day at Greg's brunch, as though there must have been a perfect speech. There wasn't. I did not expose every message. I did not demand that the room choose me. I did not tell Tessa she had ruined my life, and I did not tell my children to walk away from their father. I closed a folder. I said, "I am not signing this." That sentence did not save my marriage. By then, the marriage Greg was asking me to preserve existed mainly as security for the future he wanted somewhere else. The sentence saved me from financing that future. For 30 years, my signature had meant partnership. It appeared on tax returns, school forms, mortgages, medical consents, birthday cards, and every plan Greg and I made together. At the retirement brunch, he treated it like the last administrative step between his secret and his new life. He was wrong. My last word in our marriage was not revenge. It was consent withheld.